There's a kind of fear that comes when you realize you're one mistake away from losing everything. Duncan Merrick knew that fear well. 45 years old, no job, no home, and $80 left in his wallet. He drove to a storage auction outside Reno, hoping to find something, anything he could sell. He won Unit 47 for his last $80. When he opened the door, he found trash and boxes everywhere. Then he saw her, a woman hiding in the shadows, dirty and scared. Her name was Shelby. She'd been living in that storage unit, running from something she wouldn't talk about. Duncan had nothing left to give, but he couldn't walk away. What could two lost people possibly find together? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 6 months before Duncan Merrick stood in front of Unit 47 with his heart pounding and his wallet empty, his life looked completely different. Not perfect, mind you. It had never been perfect, but it was his, and it was steady, and that counted for something. Duncan woke every morning at 5:30 to the sound of his daughter Piper's alarm clock beeping through the thin walls of their apartment. She was 12 then, on the cusp of becoming a teenager, and she hated mornings with a passion that made him smile. He'd shuffle to her doorway in his worn slippers and knock twice, their signal, and wait until he heard her groan in acknowledgement before heading to the kitchen. The apartment wasn't much. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that barely fit a table, and 4 chairs, even though only 2 of them ever sat there. The building was old, the kind with radiators that clanked and hissed in winter, and windows that stuck in summer. But the rent was manageable. The neighborhood was safe enough, and when the evening light came through the living room window just right, it felt like home. Duncan would make coffee, strong and black, and start breakfast. Eggs usually, toast, sometimes bacon if they weren't too close to payday. Piper would emerge around 6, hair uncombed, still in her pajamas, and slump into her chair with the dramatic exhaustion only a preteen could muster. "Morning, kiddo," he'd say, sliding a plate in front of her. "It's too early to exist," she'd mutter, but she'd eat, and eventually she'd smile, and they'd talk about her day ahead. Math test, friend drama, the book she was reading that she couldn't put down, even though she was supposed to be asleep by 9. Duncan had raised her alone for 3 years. Her mother, his ex-wife Lauren, had left when Piper was 9. No dramatic fight, no final showdown, just a quiet unraveling of a marriage that had been held together by hope and stubbornness long past its expiration date. Lauren had struggled with things Duncan didn't fully understand. Restlessness, maybe. A feeling that life was passing her by. She'd moved to Colorado to find herself, she said, and Piper could come visit in the summers. Except the visits never happened. Lauren called occasionally, sent birthday cards with checks inside that felt more like guilt than love. Piper stopped asking about her after the first year. Duncan never spoke poorly of her mother. He wouldn't do that to his daughter, but he didn't need to. Piper was smart. She understood absence. So it became just the 2 of them, Duncan and Piper against the world, figuring it out as they went. Duncan worked construction, had for 22 years. He was a foreman for Grayson & Sons, a mid-sized company that handled residential projects all over northern Nevada. He was good at his job, reliable, skilled, the kind of man who showed up early and stayed late, who could read blueprints and manage crews and solve problems on the fly. His boss, Martin Grayson, had told him more than once that he was the backbone of the operation. Duncan took pride in that. He'd never finished college, never had what people called a career, but he was a good father and a hard worker, and that felt like enough. The money was decent. Not great, but decent. Enough to cover rent, groceries, utilities, and a little left over for Piper's school supplies and the occasional movie night. They lived paycheck to paycheck, sure, but lots of people did. As long as the work kept coming, they'd be fine. Except the work didn't keep coming. It started subtly. A project Yancey D here, a contract falling through there. Martin started looking stressed during their weekly meetings, rubbing his temples and talking about cash flow issues and clients who were slow to pay. By March, the tension in the office was thick enough to choke on. In April, Martin called Duncan into his office on a Tuesday afternoon. Duncan knew before he sat down. He'd seen this scene play out for other guys over the years. The closed door, the somber expression, the apology that didn't change anything. "I don't have a choice," Martin said, and Duncan believed him. The man looked 10 years older than he had 6 months ago. "I'm cutting half the crew. You're one of the best I've got, Duncan, but I can't afford to keep everyone. I'm sorry, 2 weeks severance." A handshake. A genuine expression of regret that didn't pay the bills. Duncan drove home that day in a fog. He didn't tell Piper right away. He made dinner, helped her with homework, watched her favorite show with her on the couch. She fell asleep with her head on his shoulder, and he sat there in the blue glow of the television, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on him like a physical thing. He'd find another job, he had to, but finding work in construction, when half the companies in the region were cutting staff, turned out to be harder than he'd anticipated. He applied everywhere, sent out dozens of resumes, made phone calls, showed up in person to job sites to ask if they were hiring. Everyone was polite. Everyone said they'd keep his information on file. Nobody called back. Unemployment benefits helped, but they didn't stretch far. By June, Duncan had burned through the small savings he'd managed to accumulate. By July, he was 2 months behind on rent. His landlord, a gruff man named Sal, who owned half the building, was understanding at first. "I know you're good for it," he said. But by August, even Sal's patience wore thin. He had a business to run, he explained. Bills of his own to pay. Duncan was evicted on a Wednesday morning in late August. He'd known it was coming, had been preparing Piper as best he could without terrifying her. They packed what they could fit in his truck. Clothes, a few books, the photograph albums, the essentials. Everything else got sold or left behind. The hardest conversation of Duncan's life happened in the cab of that truck, parked outside Piper's grandmother's house, 3 hours away. "It's just temporary," he told her, holding both her hands in his. "I need to get back on my feet, find steady work, get us a place." "Your grandma's excited to have you." Piper was crying, trying not to, her face red and blotchy. "I want to stay with you." "I know, sweetheart." "I know, but I can't." His voice cracked. He cleared his throat, started again. "I can't take care of you the way you deserve right now. Not until I figure this out. I don't care where we live. We can stay in the truck." "No," he said firmly. "You're going to school. You're going to have a bed and 3 meals a day and everything you need. I'm going to fix this. I promise." She hugged him so tight he could barely breathe. He walked her to the door, hugged her again, watched her grandmother, Lauren's mother, a kind woman who'd always treated him decently despite the divorce, usher her inside with gentle hands. He sat in the truck for 20 minutes after the door closed, staring at the house, feeling like he'd just failed at the only thing that ever really mattered. The weeks that followed were a blur of survival. Duncan lived in his truck, parking in different lots each night to avoid trouble. He showered at truck stops, ate cheap fast food, applied for jobs from his phone in coffee shop parking lots. He called Piper every night, kept his voice steady, told her he was doing great, almost had a lead on a place. It wasn't true. He was drowning. By late September, Duncan was down to his last $80. He needed a miracle or at least a break. He'd heard about storage unit auctions from a guy he'd worked with years ago. People bought abandoned units cheap, sold whatever was inside for profit. It was a gamble, sure, but Duncan was out of options. He found an auction listed online, happening the next morning at a facility outside Reno. He drove there with his last tank of gas, stood among the small crowd of regulars who made a living doing this, and felt completely out of his depth. When Unit 47 came up for bid, Duncan looked at the rusted padlock and the peeling paint on the door and thought about Piper, about getting her back, about having something, anything to show for himself. He bid $80. Nobody countered. The auctioneer pointed at him, said, "Sold," and handed him a bolt cutter. Duncan walked up to Unit 47, his hands shaking slightly. This was it. His last shot. He cut the lock. The metal gave way with a sharp snap. He grabbed the handle and pulled the door up, the rollers squealing in protest. The smell hit him first, stale air, unwashed fabric, something human and desperate. Then he saw the contents, Garbage bags split open, cardboard boxes torn apart, old blankets piled in corners, fast food wrappers scattered across the concrete floor. His heart sank. This was nothing, just trash. He'd gambled his last dollar on worthless junk. Then something moved in the back corner. Duncan froze. His eyes adjusted to the dim light, and he saw her, a figure huddled behind a stack of boxes, partially hidden by a filthy blanket. A woman, staring at him with wide, terrified eyes. For a moment, neither of them moved. Duncan's mind raced, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Someone was living in here. Someone had been hiding in this unit. Please, she said, her voice hoarse and cracking. Please don't call the police. Duncan stood there, bolt cutter still in his hand, and realized that his gamble had just become far more complicated than he'd ever imagined. Duncan made a decision in that moment that would change everything. He stepped fully into the unit and pulled the door halfway down behind him, blocking the view from outside. "How long have you been in here?" he asked, setting the bolt cutter down to show he wasn't a threat. Shelby's eyes darted to the tool, then back to his face. 3 weeks, maybe 4. I lost track, and nobody knew you were here. The owner stopped paying. That's why it went to auction. Her voice was rough, like she hadn't used it much lately. I saw the notice on the door yesterday. I knew someone would come. Duncan looked around the unit more carefully now. It was a 10 by 10 space, and she'd made a kind of nest in the back corner. The blanket she clutched was threadbare and stained. Empty water bottles were stacked against one wall. Food wrappers, mostly from convenience stores, cheap stuff, were gathered in a trash bag. She'd been surviving barely. "Why here?" he asked. "Why not a shelter?" Shelby's jaw tightened. "Can't go to shelters. He'd find me." He? She didn't answer, just pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders despite the September heat trapped in the enclosed space. Duncan understood then, or at least understood enough. She was running from someone, hiding, and she was terrified. He heard voices outside getting closer. 2 men talking about a unit 3 doors down, discussing whether a box of old tools was worth anything. They'd walk past any second. "Listen," Duncan said quickly, "I'm going to go out there and tell them this unit is full of junk. Nothing worth keeping. Then I'm going to close it up and come back later. Will you still be here?" Shelby stared at him, confusion and suspicion warring on her face. "Why would you do that?" "Because—" Duncan stopped, not sure how to explain it. Because he knew what it felt like to have nowhere to go. Because he'd spent the last 3 weeks sleeping in his truck and understood desperation. Because walking away felt like admitting that kindness was a luxury he couldn't afford, and he wasn't ready to believe that yet. "Just stay quiet," he said instead. "I'll be back in an hour." He walked out before she could respond, pulling the door down but not locking it. The 2 men were passing by, and Duncan made a show of looking disgusted. "Anything good?" one of them asked. Duncan shook his head. "Trash. Literally just garbage bags and broken furniture. Total waste." They moved on without much interest. Duncan walked back to his truck, his mind racing. What was he doing? He had $80, no, $0 now, and no plan beyond hoping to flip whatever he found in that unit. And instead of merchandise, he'd found a terrified woman living in squalor. He should walk away. Let someone else deal with it. He had Piper to think about. But as he sat in his truck, watching the other bidders load their finds, he kept seeing Shelby's face, the fear in her eyes, the way she'd flinched when he moved. He knew that look. He'd seen it in the mirror often enough lately, the look of someone who'd been beaten down by life and was just trying to survive one more day. Duncan started the truck and drove to the nearest gas station. He bought 2 bottles of water, 2 protein bars, and a package of baby wipes with the last few dollars in his pocket, charging the rest to a credit card that was already maxed out. Then he drove back to the storage facility. The auction had ended. Most people had cleared out. The facility manager was in his office, probably doing paperwork. Duncan parked away from the main building and walked quickly to Unit 47. He knocked softly on the door before pulling it up. "It's Duncan. I'm coming in." Shelby was standing now, pressed against the back wall, ready to run if she needed to. Duncan held up the plastic bag. "Brought you some things," he said, setting it down just inside the entrance. "Water, food, wipes if you want to clean up a little." She didn't move toward the bag, just stared at it like it might be a trap. "I'm not going to hurt you," Duncan said. "And I'm not going to turn you in. He ran a hand through his hair, suddenly exhausted. "Look, I don't know what you're running from, and you don't have to tell me. But I can't just leave you here with nothing." "Why not?" Her voice was stronger now, challenging. Everyone else did. The words hung in the air between them. Duncan thought about Piper, about the promise he'd made to fix things, to bring her home. He thought about his empty bank account and his uncertain future. He thought about all the reasons this was a terrible idea. Then he thought about what kind of man he wanted to be. What kind of father? What kind of human being? "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply. Shelby's expression shifted, something cracking in the hard shell she'd built around herself. She took a tentative step forward, then another, until she could reach the bag. She grabbed it quickly and retreated, but her eyes never left his face. "Thank you," she whispered. Duncan nodded. "There's not much in there. I don't have much. But it's something." She opened one of the water bottles and drank deeply, desperately. When she finished, she wiped her mouth with the back of her hand and looked at him with slightly less suspicion. "What happens now?" she asked. "I don't know," Duncan admitted. "I bought this unit hoping to find something I could sell. I need money pretty badly, but I'm guessing most of what's in here is yours." Shelby shook her head. "It belonged to the woman who owned the unit before, Karen. She let me hide here when I had nowhere else to go. Then she disappeared, stopped paying the rent. I don't know what happened to her." Duncan looked around at the chaos, the torn garbage bags, the scattered boxes. "Is there anything valuable in here? Anything worth selling?" "I don't know. I never really looked. I was just trying to stay hidden." An idea was forming in Duncan's mind, crazy and impractical, and probably doomed to fail. But it was an idea, and that was more than he'd had an hour ago. "What if we look together?" he said. "Go through everything, see what's actually here. If we find anything worth selling, we split it 50-50. Shelby stared at him like he'd suggested flying to the moon. "You want to work with me? I need help going through this stuff, and you need money to get back on your feet. Seems like we could help each other. You don't know anything about me. I know you're scared and alone and living in a storage unit," Duncan said. "I know what that feels like. Maybe not exactly, but close enough." Shelby was quiet for a long moment, studying his face, like she was trying to read his intentions. Finally, she said, "I can't pay you back if there's nothing valuable here." "Then we'll both be broke together," Duncan said with a tired smile. "Won't be the first time for me." Another pause, longer this time. Then Shelby set down the water bottle and took a small step forward. "Okay," she said. "We can try." Duncan felt something shift in his chest, not quite hope, but maybe the possibility of it. He pulled the door up higher, letting more light into the unit. "Let's see what we've got," he said. They started with the garbage bags nearest the door. Most of them contained exactly what they looked like. Actual garbage, old clothes, broken household items. But in the third bag, Duncan's hand closed around something solid and rectangular. He pulled it out carefully, a small wooden box carved with intricate patterns. He opened it, and there, nestled in faded velvet, was a pocket watch. Duncan held it up to the light filtering through the door. Gold casing, or at least gold-plated. The face was pristine, Roman numerals elegant and precise. He pressed the stem, and the cover popped open with a satisfying click. "Is that real?" Shelby asked, moving closer. "I think it might be," Duncan said, turning it over in his hand. Engraved on the back were initials, W.H. For the first time since he'd cut that padlock, Duncan felt a flutter of genuine hope. This watch could be worth something. Maybe not a fortune, but something. He looked at Shelby, and she looked back at him, and in that moment they both understood that they'd just become partners in the strangest venture either of them had ever undertaken. 50-50, she said. 50-50, Duncan confirmed. They got back to work. Duncan arrived at the storage unit the next morning with coffee and breakfast sandwiches from a drive-through he could barely afford. The sun was just beginning to warm the pavement, and the facility was quiet except for the distant hum of traffic on the highway. He knocked on the metal door before opening it, a courtesy he'd decided on during the sleepless night in his truck. Shelby was awake, sitting cross-legged on her blanket, looking slightly more alert than she had yesterday. "Brought breakfast," he said, holding up the bag. Her eyes widened. "You didn't have to do that." "I know." He stepped inside and handed her a sandwich and coffee. "But we're partners now. Partners look out for each other." Shelby took the food with trembling hands, and Duncan pretended not to notice the way her eyes glistened with gratitude. She ate slowly, deliberately, like she was savoring every bite. Duncan sipped his coffee and surveyed the unit in the morning light. They'd made a small dent yesterday, but there was still a mountain of work ahead. Boxes stacked haphazardly, more garbage bags, furniture buried under layers of debris. "I did some research last night," he said, pulling out his phone. "That pocket watch, if it's authentic 19th century gold, it could be worth anywhere from $400 to $600. Maybe more to the right collector?" Shelby paused mid-bite. "That much?" "That much," Duncan smiled. "There's a pawn shop about 15 minutes from here. I figured we could take it there today, see what they offer. Then we keep sorting, see what else is hiding in here. You really think there's more?" "I think someone went to a lot of trouble to hide in this unit specifically. Your friend Karen, she must have had a reason for keeping it, for letting you stay here. Maybe she knew there was value in all this mess." Shelby finished her sandwich and wiped her hands on her jeans. "She was kind. That's all I really knew about her. She saw me at a women's shelter, asked if I needed help. She said she had a place I could stay, no questions asked." Her voice dropped. "I should have asked more questions." "Sometimes survival doesn't leave room for questions," Duncan said quietly. They worked through the morning, developing a system. Duncan would pull items out, Shelby would sort them into 3 piles. Trash, maybe valuable, and definitely valuable. The definitely valuable pile was still depressingly small, just the pocket watch and a set of vintage vinyl records they'd found in a box marked fragile. Around noon, they took a break. Duncan had brought more water, and they sat in the shade just inside the unit, the door propped open to let in a breeze. "Can I ask you something?" Shelby said, her voice hesitant. "Sure. Why are you really doing this? And don't say it's just about the money. You could have reported me, cleared out the unit yourself, kept everything." Duncan was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "I have a daughter," he said finally. "Piper. She's 12. She's living with her grandmother right now because I lost my job and couldn't keep our apartment. Every night I call her and promise I'm going to fix things, that I'm going to bring her home." He looked at Shelby. "But I've been lying. I had no idea how to fix things. Then I found you and I realized maybe I can't fix everything, but I can do this one thing. I can help one person, and maybe that counts for something." Shelby's expression softened. "She's lucky to have you as a father. I don't feel very lucky right now. I feel like I failed her. You haven't failed anyone. You're still fighting. That's what matters." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the occasional car drive past the facility. Duncan felt something unfamiliar, not quite peace, but a lessening of the constant anxiety that had plagued him for months. "My turn to ask a question," he said. "The person you're running from, is he dangerous?" Shelby's entire body tensed. "Yes." "Does he know you're in Reno?" "I don't think so. I've been careful. No credit cards, no phone, nothing he could trace. But men like him, they don't give up. They just keep looking." Duncan wanted to press for more details, but the fear in her voice stopped him. "Well, for what it's worth, you're not alone anymore. Whatever comes, we'll deal with it together." Shelby looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read, gratitude mixed with disbelief, as if kindness was a foreign language she'd forgotten how to speak. That afternoon, they drove to the pawn shop in Duncan's truck. Shelby sat rigid in the passenger seat, eyes darting to every car they passed, every person on the sidewalk. Duncan kept the conversation light, pointing out landmarks, telling stories about Piper that made Shelby's shoulders gradually relax. The pawn shop was a small, cluttered place that smelled like old books and motor oil. The owner, a barrel-chested man with reading glasses perched on his bald head, examined the pocket watch with a jeweler's loupe. "1870 manufacture," he said, his voice gruff but not unkind. "Gold-plated, not solid gold, but the mechanism is Swiss, well-maintained." He set it down on the counter. I can give you $450. Duncan glanced at Shelby. She gave a tiny nod. Deal, Duncan said. The man counted out cash, 9 $50 bills, and Duncan thanked him. Outside, standing by the truck, Duncan counted the bills again and handed half to Shelby. She stared at the money like it was a mirage. $225, she whispered. $225 each, Duncan corrected. That's the most money I've had in my hands in 2 months. Shelby's eyes filled with tears. I can't take this. You bought the unit. This is yours. Partners, Duncan said firmly. Remember? 50-50. Now come on, we're going to get you some real food and some clean clothes. Duncan, I'm not arguing about this, Shelby. You need things and we have money now. Let me do this. She wiped her eyes quickly, nodded and climbed into the truck. They spent the afternoon at a discount store. Duncan bought Shelby 3 changes of clothes, toiletries, a sleeping bag, and a small camping stove. She protested every item, but Duncan insisted, reminding her that she'd need to be functional if they were going to keep working through the unit. With his own share, Duncan bought groceries, real groceries, not just fast food, and put $50 aside. It wasn't much, but it was a start. For the first time in weeks, he felt like maybe, just maybe, things were beginning to turn around. That evening, back at the unit, Shelby changed into clean clothes and used the baby wipes to scrub her face and hands. When she emerged from behind a makeshift privacy curtain Duncan had rigged with a blanket, she looked almost like a different person. Better? Duncan asked. So much better. She smiled, a real smile, the first he'd seen from her. Thank you for all of this. Thank you for trusting me, Duncan said. I know that wasn't easy. They heated canned soup on the little camping stove and ate dinner sitting on overturned crates. Talking about nothing important, favorite movies, childhood memories, the small details that made them human. For a few hours, they weren't 2 desperate people living on the edge. They were just 2 people sharing a meal. As the sun set and the temperature dropped, Duncan stood to leave. I'll be back tomorrow morning, same time. Duncan? Shelby's voice stopped him at the door. I feel safer with you around. I just wanted you to know that. Duncan felt a lump form in his throat. Get some rest. Tomorrow we keep digging. He drove back to his usual parking spot, climbed into the back of his truck, and for the first time in months, he slept soundly. 5 days had passed since Duncan first opened Unit 47, and the rhythm they'd established felt almost normal. Almost. Duncan arrived each morning with breakfast. Shelby had coffee ready on the camping stove, and they worked side by side, sorting through layers of someone else's abandoned life. They'd sold a few more items. The vinyl records had brought in another $160, and a collection of vintage tools had netted them $200. Split evenly, Duncan now had just over $400 saved. It wasn't enough for an apartment yet, but it was progress. Real, tangible progress. With part of her earnings, Shelby had bought a prepaid phone. Duncan noticed she never turned it on except to check the time, keeping it powered down as if the device itself might betray her location. He didn't push her about it. On the 6th morning, Duncan pulled up to find Shelby standing outside the unit, arms wrapped around herself, despite the warm September air. Her face was pale, eyes red-rimmed. "What's wrong?" he asked immediately, scanning the area for threats. "Nothing, She shook her head. "Bad dreams, that's all." Duncan didn't believe her, but he'd learned when to press and when to give her space. "Come on, let's get some real breakfast. Sit-down restaurant, not drive-through, my treat." "You don't have to." "I know, I want to." They drove to a diner on the edge of town, the kind with vinyl booths and a laminated menu that hadn't changed since the 80s. Shelby ordered pancakes and eggs, and Duncan watched as she ate with the same careful deliberation she always did, like she couldn't quite believe the food was really hers. "I've been thinking," Duncan said, sipping his coffee. "We've made pretty good money from the unit so far. Another week or 2, and I might have enough for a deposit on an apartment. Nothing fancy, but a place where Piper and I can live." Shelby's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "That's wonderful, Duncan. Really, you'll have your daughter back." "That's the plan." He hesitated, then continued, I was also thinking the apartment I'm looking at has 2 bedrooms. I know you've been staying at that motel the last couple nights, but that's eating through your money fast. What if you took the second room? You'd have your own space, your own door you could lock, just until you figure out your next step. Shelby set down her fork, her expression unreadable. You're asking me to live with you and your 12-year-old daughter? I'm offering you a safe place to stay. That's all. No expectations, no strings, just roommates, I guess. We split utilities. You pay what you can for rent when you can. If it doesn't work out, you leave. But at least you'd have somewhere stable while you get back on your feet. Duncan, you barely know me. I know you've been working beside me every day for almost a week. I know you're honest and hard-working, and you're running from someone who hurt you. I know Piper needs to see what it looks like when people help each other, when we don't just turn away from someone in need. He met her eyes. And I know I trust you. That's not something I give easily. Shelby's eyes glistened. What if he finds me? What if I bring danger to your door? Then we deal with it, together, just like we've been dealing with everything else. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her plate. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I had a daughter once. I was 19. I gave her up for adoption. Duncan waited, letting her take her time. I was too young, too scared, too broken. I thought I was doing the right thing, giving her a better life than I could provide, but I've regretted it every single day since. She looked up at him, tears spilling over. Some of us aren't meant to be parents. Some of us just damage everything we touch. That's not true, Duncan said firmly. You were 19 and alone and doing the best you could. That doesn't mean you weren't meant to be a mother. It means you made an impossible choice with the resources you had. You don't know that. I know that you're sitting here terrified and exhausted, and your first concern is whether you might put a child in danger. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are. Shelby wiped her eyes with her napkin. I can't. I don't want to hurt anyone else. I don't want to be the reason something bad happens to Piper. You won't be. We'll be careful. We'll have a plan. But Shelby, you can't keep running forever. At some point, you have to let someone help you stand still. They finished breakfast in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. When they returned to the storage unit, Shelby seemed steadier, more focused. They worked through the afternoon, and that's when they found it. A sealed plastic container tucked behind a broken dresser. Inside was a journal, the kind with a leather cover and pages yellowed with age. Duncan opened it carefully. The handwriting was neat, feminine, dated from 2 years earlier. March 15th, he read aloud. I don't know if anyone will ever read this, but I need to write it down. I need someone to know I was here, that I survived. My name is Karen, and I'm hiding from my husband. Shelby moved closer, reading over his shoulder. The entries continued, chronicling a woman's desperate escape from an abusive marriage. Each page detailed her fear, her planning, the small victories of staying hidden one more day. There were practical notes, too, lists of resources, safe places, people who helped women disappear. The final entry was dated 6 months ago. I made it, Duncan read, his voice softer now. I'm free. I'm leaving this here in case someone else needs to know. You can survive this. You can build a new life. Don't give up. You're stronger than you think. Shelby's hand was pressed to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Duncan closed the journal and set it aside, giving her space to process. That's why she let you stay here, he said quietly. She understood. I never knew, Shelby whispered. She never told me her story. She just helped me. No questions, just kindness. People who've been through hell recognize each other, Duncan said. They know what it costs to survive. Shelby took the journal in her hands, holding it like a sacred object. He won't stop looking for me. Byron, that's his name. He won't ever stop. It was the first time she'd said his name aloud, and Duncan heard the weight of it, the fear embedded in those 2 syllables. Then we make sure he can't find you, Duncan said. We'll be smart, we'll be careful. But Shelby, you deserve to stop running. You deserve to feel safe. She looked at him, really looked at him, searching his face for any sign of doubt or deception. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because she nodded slowly. "Okay," she said, "I'll take the room, if Piper's okay with it." "She will be," Duncan promised. They worked until sunset, the journal sitting between them like a talisman. It represented something neither of them had felt in a long time, hope that maybe, just maybe, surviving was possible. That freedom wasn't just a fantasy, but something real people actually achieved. As Duncan prepared to leave, Shelby called out to him, "Duncan, thank you for seeing me as a person, not just a problem to solve." "You were never a problem," Duncan said. "You were just someone who needed help, just like me." He drove away thinking about Karen, wondering where she was now, hoping she'd found the peace she deserved. And he thought about Shelby, about the courage it took to keep moving forward when everything in you wanted to give up. Tomorrow they'd keep searching through the unit. Tomorrow they'd keep building towards something better. Tonight, for the first time in weeks, Duncan felt like he wasn't just surviving. He was living. 2 weeks had passed, and the landscape of their lives had shifted in small but meaningful ways. Duncan had secured a lease on a modest 2-bedroom apartment in a quiet complex on the south side of Reno. It wasn't much: thin carpets, a kitchen with outdated appliances, walls that probably heard every conversation from the neighbors, but it had a roof that didn't leak and doors with locks that worked. He'd called Piper 3 days ago to tell her the news. "Really, Dad, really?" Her voice had cracked with excitement and relief. "Really, sweetheart? I'm picking you up this weekend. We're coming home." "We?" Duncan had explained about Shelby, carefully, honestly. A friend who'd helped him get back on his feet. Someone who needed a safe place to stay for a while. Piper had listened quietly, then asked the question that mattered most to her. "Is she nice?" "She's very nice. Kind. She's been through some hard times, but she's good people." "Okay then," Piper had said, with the easy acceptance of a child who trusted her father's judgment. "I can't wait to come home." Now Duncan stood in the mostly empty apartment, Shelby beside him, both of them surveying their new space. They'd furnished it with bargain finds. A couch from a thrift store, beds from a discount warehouse, a kitchen table someone was giving away on Craigslist. It looked sparse, but it looked like possibility. "I still can't believe this is real," Shelby said, running her hand along the kitchen counter. "An actual apartment. A home. It's real," Duncan confirmed. "And it's yours, too. Your name's on the lease as a co-tenant. You're not a guest here, Shelby. You're a resident." She turned to him, emotion flickering across her face. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did. You deserve stability. You deserve legal protections. If anything happens, you have rights here." They'd continued working the storage unit even after securing the apartment, and their persistence had paid off. Hidden in a box of costume jewelry, they'd found an antique locket, genuine gold, with intricate engraving and a photograph inside dated 1943. A young soldier and his sweetheart, their faces full of hope and promise. The initials engraved on the back read AH and MH. The pawnshop owner had offered $800. Duncan and Shelby had stared at each other in disbelief, then accepted. $400 each, enough to cover the security deposit and first month's rent with money left over. But Shelby had asked to keep the locket for a few more days before they sold it. Duncan hadn't questioned why. He'd learned that some things needed time. Now, in the quiet of the apartment, Shelby pulled the locket from her pocket and opened it, studying the photograph inside. "They look so happy," she said. "Like they believed in forever." Duncan moved to stand beside her, looking at the faded image. "Maybe they got there forever. Maybe this is someone's love story that actually worked out. Or maybe it ended badly, and that's why the locket ended up in a storage unit." "You always go to the dark place first," Duncan observed gently. "It's safer there. Expectations can't hurt you if you don't have any." Duncan took the locket from her hands and closed it carefully. "You want to talk about him?" "About Byron." Shelby's entire body went rigid. Even hearing his name spoken aloud seemed to cause her physical pain. She moved to the window, staring out at the parking lot below. "I met him when I was 26, she said finally. "I was working as a nurse in Portland. He came into the ER one night, minor injury, nothing serious. But he was charming, attentive, made me feel special. She laughed, a bitter sound. Isn't that how it always starts? Duncan didn't respond, just listened. We dated for 6 months before he proposed. Everyone thought it was romantic. The whirlwind courtship, the big wedding. I thought I'd found my person. She turned from the window, her face expressionless. In that way Duncan had learned meant she was holding back enormous emotion. The first time he hit me was on our honeymoon. I'd laughed at another man's joke at the hotel bar. Byron said I was flirting, making him look stupid. He apologized after, cried, said it would never happen again. But it did, Duncan said quietly. It always does. Shelby wrapped her arms around herself. It got worse over the next 5 years. He controlled everything, my phone, my email, my money. I couldn't see friends without permission. I lost my job because he convinced my supervisor I was unstable. He isolated me completely, and when I tried to leave, he'd threaten my family. My sister, my mother. He said he'd kill them if I left him. Did you go to the police? Twice. Both times he talked his way out of it. He owns a security company, has connections with local law enforcement. The restraining order I got last year, he violated it 3 times, and nothing happened. The system doesn't work for women like me, Duncan. It's designed to protect men like him. Duncan felt anger rising in his chest, hot and righteous. So you ran. I ran. Changed my name, dyed my hair, moved across state lines. I thought I was safe in Sacramento. Then one day I saw him in a parking lot, talking to a private investigator. He'd found me. Her voice broke. So I ran again, ended up in Reno with nothing. That's when I met Karen at the shelter. She saw something in me, recognized it maybe. She gave me the key to the storage unit, told me I could hide there as long as I needed. And she never told you about her own history. Never. She just said she understood, and I believed her. Shelby wiped her eyes. 3 months ago I saw Byron again. Just a glimpse, but it was him. I've been terrified every day since, waiting for him to find me. Knowing he will eventually. Duncan moved to stand beside her at the window. What if he doesn't? What if this time you actually got away? Men like Byron don't give up, Duncan. They see it as a challenge, an insult. He'd rather see me dead than free. Then we make sure you stay free. Duncan's voice was firm. We're careful. We're smart. We document everything. If he shows up, we're ready. Shelby looked at him with a mixture of hope and despair. You don't know what you're promising. You don't know what he's capable of. Then tell me. Tell me everything, and we'll figure out how to protect you. She studied his face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, but not today. Today, let's just enjoy having a home. Can we do that? Yeah, Duncan said, understanding that healing happened in increments, not all at once. We can do that. That evening they sat on the thrift store couch, eating takeout Chinese food, the locket sitting on the coffee table between them. The soldier and his sweetheart, frozen forever in a moment of hope. What do you think happened to them? Shelby asked, gesturing to the locket. Duncan considered the question. I think they survived the war. I think they had 50 years together, raised a family, grew old, holding hands. And when they died, their kids didn't know what to do with all their stuff, so it ended up in storage. Not tragic, just the natural end of a life well lived. Shelby smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. I like that version. Then that's the version we'll believe. They finished their dinner in comfortable silence, and for a few hours, the weight of the past and the fear of the future faded into the background. They were just 2 people sharing a meal in a home they'd built from nothing, and that was enough. Tomorrow, Duncan would drive to pick up Piper. Tomorrow, their little makeshift family would begin in earnest. Tomorrow, the real work of healing would continue. But tonight, they rested. Duncan brought Piper home on a Saturday morning. Shelby had spent the previous evening cleaning the apartment obsessively, rearranging furniture, making sure Piper's room looked welcoming. Duncan had watched her with understanding. She was nervous about meeting his daughter, about being accepted into this fragile new family they were building. When the truck pulled up, Shelby stood by the window, her hands twisted together. Duncan had told Piper about her, but meeting in person was different. What if the girl was uncomfortable? What if she resented a stranger living in their home? Duncan and Piper climbed the stairs, and Shelby heard their voices through the door, his deep and steady, hers bright with excitement. Then the door opened, and there she was. Piper Merrick was 12 years old, with her father's dark hair and a scattering of freckles across her nose. She wore jeans and a purple hoodie, and her eyes were curious, but not unkind as they settled on Shelby. "Piper, this is Shelby," Duncan said. "Shelby, my daughter." "Hi," Piper said, offering a small wave. "Hi," Shelby replied, her voice softer than she intended. "It's really nice to meet you." There was a moment of awkward silence, then Piper said, "Dad says you helped him find valuable stuff in a storage unit." "That's pretty cool." "He helped me too," Shelby said. "More than he probably told you." Piper looked between them, something knowing in her expression despite her age. "He's good at that. Helping people." The tension broke and Duncan smiled. "All right, kiddo. Want to see your room?" Piper's face lit up. "We have rooms, plural. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen, and a living room. It's not fancy, but it's ours." Piper rushed down the hallway and Duncan followed, leaving Shelby alone for a moment to collect herself. She pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the rapid beating of her heart. The girl was sweet, open, nothing like the rejection Shelby had braced herself for. Over the next few days, they fell into a rhythm. Duncan started his new job, construction work with a company across town, grateful to finally have steady income again. Shelby found part-time work at a community health clinic, using her nursing credentials under her new name. The pay was modest, but it was honest work, and it felt good to help people again. Piper adjusted quickly, thriving in her new school and chattering every evening about her classes and new friends. She treated Shelby with casual friendliness, asking questions about nursing, requesting help with homework, gradually weaving her into the fabric of their daily lives. 3 weeks into their new arrangement, they were finishing dinner when Piper asked, "Can I see the locket?" "Dad said it's really old." Shelby retrieved it from her room and placed it on the table. Piper opened it carefully, studying the photograph inside. "They look happy," she said. "That's what your dad said too. Do you think they stayed together?" Shelby glanced at Duncan, who smiled encouragingly. "I'd like to think they did. I'd like to think love can last." "It can," Piper said, with the certainty of someone who'd never had reason to doubt it. "My dad loved my mom even when she left. He still doesn't say mean things about her." The observation hung in the air, profound in its simplicity. Duncan cleared his throat. "Love's complicated, sweetheart. Sometimes people love each other but still can't make it work. But you and Shelby made it work," Piper said. "You're friends and you help each other, and that's a kind of love too, right?" Shelby felt her throat tighten. "Yes," she managed. "That's exactly what it is." That night, after Piper had gone to bed, Duncan and Shelby sat on the small balcony off the living room, the city lights stretching before them. "She's remarkable," Shelby said. "You've done an incredible job with her." "She's the best thing I ever did right," Duncan replied. "Even when everything else fell apart, I had her to fight for." "I think about my daughter sometimes," Shelby said quietly. "She'd be 17 now. I wonder if she's happy. If her adoptive parents gave her a good life, I'm sure they did. And I'm sure she knows somewhere, somehow, that you loved her enough to want better for her." Shelby wiped at her eyes. "I gave up the right to know that when I signed those papers. You gave her a chance. That took courage." They sat in silence for a while, then Shelby said, "I saw a car today, when I was walking to work. Black SUV, tinted windows. It slowed down as it passed me." Duncan's entire body went alert. "Did you see the driver?" "No, it might have been nothing. But Duncan, I'm scared. What if he's found me? What if I've put you and Piper in danger?" "Did the car follow you?" "I don't think so. I took a different route, doubled back twice. When I looked again, it was gone." Duncan was quiet, thinking. "Okay, here's what we do. Tomorrow I'm going to contact a lawyer, a good one who specializes in domestic abuse cases. We're going to document everything, your history with Byron, the threats, the restraining order violations. We're going to build a case so strong that if he does show up, we have legal recourse. Restraining orders don't work, Duncan. I already told you that. Then we find something that does. We're not helpless here, Shelby. We have options." "What options?" "Run again?" I'm tired of running, but I can't just wait for him to show up either. Duncan took her hand, his grip firm and reassuring. You're not alone anymore. That changes everything. We'll be smart. We'll be prepared. And if he comes, we'll face him together. Shelby wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that strength in numbers meant safety, but she'd learned the hard way that Byron was patient, methodical, and relentless. He'd wait months if he had to, watching, planning, finding the perfect moment to strike. The next morning, Duncan made calls during his lunch break and found a lawyer named Iris Hargrave, who specialized in high-risk protective cases. Her office was 2 hours north, but she agreed to a consultation the following week. Meanwhile, Shelby became hyper-vigilant. She varied her route to work, checked over her shoulder constantly, kept her phone charged and accessible. She hated living this way, hated that fear was her constant companion, but survival meant staying alert. One evening, while helping Piper with a school project about family history, Shelby found herself talking about her own childhood. Her parents had divorced when she was young. Her mother had struggled with depression. Her father had been distant, more interested in his work than his children. Is that why you became a nurse? Piper asked. To help people who were struggling? Shelby paused, considering. Maybe. I think I wanted to be someone who showed up for people. Someone reliable. You are reliable, Piper said simply. You're here, aren't you? The words struck something deep in Shelby's chest. She was here, despite everything, despite the fear and the uncertainty, and the constant threat hanging over her head. She'd chosen to stay, to build something with these people who'd become her family. That night, Duncan came home with something wrapped in brown paper. He handed it to Shelby with a slight smile. What's this? She asked. Open it. Inside was a small metal object, a military dog tag, worn and aged. The name engraved read, Sergeant Harold Finch, 1922-1945. I found it today, Duncan explained. Back corner of the unit, in a leather pouch wrapped in an American flag. There was a note with it. He handed her a piece of paper, yellowed with age. The handwriting was the same as Karen's journal. Dad never made it home, Shelby read aloud, but he taught me to stand up for what's right. This place is his legacy. Duncan's voice was quiet. Karen's father. He died in World War II, and she kept his dog tag as a reminder to be brave. To fight for what matters. Shelby held the dog tag carefully, feeling the weight of history in her palm. Why are you showing me this? Because sometimes we need to remember that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about being terrified and standing your ground anyway. Karen did that. Her father did that. And you're doing it right now. Shelby closed her fingers around the dog tag, drawing strength from the metal and the story it represented. I'm so tired of being scared. I know. But you're not running anymore. That's the first step. They decided to keep the dog tag rather than sell it. Some things they agreed were worth more than money. It sat on the mantel in the living room, a reminder that bravery was possible even when everything felt impossible. As Shelby lay in bed that night, she thought about Harold Finch, about Karen, about all the people who'd faced their fears and survived. She thought about Duncan and Piper, about the home they'd given her. And she made a decision. If Byron found her, she wouldn't run. Not this time. This time, she'd stand and fight. Whatever came next, she'd face it head-on. The appointment with Iris Hargrave was scheduled for Saturday morning. Duncan, Shelby, and Piper would make the 2-hour drive north together, treat it like a day trip. Piper didn't know all the details, just that they were helping Shelby with some legal matters, and Duncan wanted to keep it that way for as long as possible. Friday evening, they were finishing dinner when Shelby remembered something. I need to go back to the storage unit tomorrow before we leave. I think I left my good jacket there last week. We can swing by on the way out of town, Duncan offered. It's not far from the highway. They'd kept the unit for 1 more month, using it to store the last few items they hadn't yet sold or donated. The rent was paid through the end of October, and Duncan figured they'd clear it out completely in the next week or two. That night, Shelby couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the black SUV, about the feeling of being watched. Twice, she got up and checked the locks on the doors, peered through the blinds at the parking lot below. Everything seemed normal, but the unease wouldn't leave her. At midnight, she was standing at the kitchen window when her prepaid phone buzzed. She'd turned it on earlier to check the time and forgotten to power it back down. Now a text message appeared from an unknown number. If you need help, press 1, they'll answer. Okay, Shelby's heart stopped. Karen. But Karen had disappeared months ago, and this phone was new. How could... Then she remembered. Back at the storage unit, buried in one of the last boxes they'd sorted through, there had been another prepaid phone. She'd found it weeks ago, wrapped in plastic with a note attached. The note had said the same thing this text message said now. She'd activated it out of curiosity, pressed 1, but no one had answered. She'd assumed the service was dead, the network defunct. She'd tossed the phone back in the box and forgotten about it. But someone was monitoring that number. Someone had just sent her a message. With shaking hands, Shelby pressed 1. The phone rang twice, then a woman's voice answered. Calm, professional, cautious. Identification code? I don't have one. I found this phone. A woman named Karen left it. Silence then. Karen Finch. I don't know her last name. She helped me. She let me stay in her storage unit. Where are you located? Reno, Nevada. The woman's tone shifted immediately, becoming urgent. How long have you been in Reno? About a month. Why? You need to leave tonight, right now. Shelby's blood turned to ice. What? Why? Our network was compromised 6 months ago. We've been operating under the assumption that anyone using our resources has been flagged. If you're running from someone, if you used any of our safe houses or contacts, they know the general area where you are. Who knows? Whoever you're running from. If they have the resources, money, connections, a private investigator, they've been tracking our network. We've tried to warn everyone, but Karen went dark 4 months ago. We assumed her contacts were safe. But if you activated that phone, it pinged our system. And if our system was breached, he knows, Shelby whispered. Byron knows I'm in Reno. If he's been monitoring, yes. Property records, storage unit auctions, anything public, he could piece it together. You need to disappear, now. The call ended abruptly, leaving Shelby standing in the dark kitchen, phone clutched in her trembling hand. Duncan emerged from his room, drawn by the sound of voices. Shelby, what's wrong? She turned to him, face white with terror. He knows. Byron knows I'm here. Duncan was instantly alert. How? She explained about the phone, about the network, about everything the woman had said. Duncan listened, his jaw tightening with each word. Okay, he said, forcing calm into his voice. Okay, we pack essentials, we leave tonight. We'll figure out where to go once we're on the road. Duncan, I can't ask you to... You're not asking. I'm telling you. We're in this together, remember? They moved quickly, quietly, not wanting to wake Piper yet. Duncan threw clothes and toiletries into a duffel bag, while Shelby gathered her few possessions. They were loading the truck when Duncan's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, Unit 47, 15 minutes. Duncan showed it to Shelby. This has to be connected. It's a trap. Or it's the woman from the network trying to help. Either way, we need to know what we're dealing with. Against every instinct screaming at her to run, Shelby nodded. They woke Piper gently, told her they were taking a late-night drive, asked her to trust them. The girl, still half asleep, climbed into the truck without protest. Duncan drove to the storage facility, his mind racing through scenarios. If Byron was there, if this was a confrontation, he'd keep Piper in the truck and handle it. If it was help, they'd take it and disappear. The facility was dark, except for a few security lights casting long shadows across the pavement. Duncan parked away from Unit 47, told Piper to stay in the truck with the doors locked. Dad? Her voice was small, scared now that she was fully awake. It's okay, sweetheart. Just stay here. If anything happens, you call 911, understand? She nodded, eyes wide. Duncan and Shelby approached Unit 47 cautiously. The door was closed but not locked. Duncan pulled it open slowly and they stepped inside. A flashlight beam hit them immediately, and they both froze. But the voice that spoke wasn't Byron's. It was female, older, authoritative. Shelby? Duncan Merrick? Who are you? Duncan demanded. My name is Iris Hargrave. I'm the lawyer you were supposed to meet tomorrow. The woman who called you, she's a colleague. She contacted me because your case is urgent and we're out of time. Out of time for what? Iris stepped forward, and they could see her now, a woman in her 60s, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense. She held up a tablet showing them a photograph. It was Shelby, taken yesterday, outside the health clinic where she worked. Byron hired a private investigator 3 months ago, Iris explained. The investigator infiltrated our support network, got access to our database. He's been tracking every woman who used our services. When you activated that phone, it confirmed your location. He knows you're in Reno, and he knows you're connected to this storage unit through public auction records. How do you know all this? Shelby asked, her voice hollow. Because the investigator reached out to me 2 days ago. He wanted legal advice on how to locate someone. He didn't know I specialize in protecting abuse survivors. I played along, got information, and realized he was talking about you. Where is he now? Duncan asked. Last I heard, he was meeting with Byron tonight. They're planning to confront you tomorrow. They know where you work, where you live. They have your address, Duncan. They have everything. Shelby's legs nearly gave out. Duncan caught her, held her steady. What do we do? He asked Iris. You have 2 choices. Keep running until he finds you again, which he will. Or you stay, and we end this legally, properly. We document everything. We get law enforcement involved, and we put Byron away before he can hurt you again. The law doesn't protect women like me, Shelby said bitterly. It does when we do it right. I've been handling cases like yours for 30 years, Shelby. I know how to make the system work. But you have to trust me, and you have to be brave enough to stand your ground. Duncan looked at Shelby, saw the fear and exhaustion in her eyes. Then he saw something else, a flicker of determination. If we do this, Shelby said slowly, if we stay and fight, what exactly are we fighting for? Your freedom, Iris said simply. Permanent restraining order, criminal charges for stalking and harassment, possibly jail time for Byron, but most importantly, you get your life back. No more running, no more hiding. Shelby looked at Duncan, then at the storage unit around them, the place where everything had started, where 2 broken people had found each other and built something worth protecting. I'm tired of running, she said. Then we stop running, Duncan replied. Together, Iris nodded approvingly. Good. Then here's what we're going to do. She laid out a plan, careful, calculated, designed to turn Byron's obsession into his downfall. They'd use his investigators' information against him, document every instance of stalking, build a case so airtight that no amount of money or connections could save him. It was risky. It was terrifying. But for the first time since she'd fled Portland, Shelby felt something other than fear. She felt ready. Iris drove them to a safe house an hour outside Reno, a small farmhouse owned by a retired detective who'd spent his career working domestic violence cases. The house sat at the end of a long gravel driveway, surrounded by open fields, that made it impossible for anyone to approach unseen. Piper had fallen back asleep in the truck, and Duncan carried her inside, laying her gently on a bed in one of the spare rooms. When he returned to the kitchen, Shelby and Iris were already deep in conversation, papers spread across the worn wooden table. The key, Iris was saying, is that we control the narrative. Byron thinks he has the advantage because he knows where you are. We turn that into a trap. How? Shelby asked, her voice steadier than Duncan expected. We need documented evidence of current harassment. The restraining order you filed last year in Oregon is good, but it's not enough for criminal charges. We need to prove he's actively stalking you across state lines. That's federal. Duncan pulled up a chair, exhaustion settling into his bones. It was past 2 in the morning, and the adrenaline was starting to wear off. So we let him find her? Let him make contact? In a controlled environment, yes. With law enforcement present but concealed. We document everything, photos, video, audio recordings. If he approaches her, if he makes threats, if he so much as speaks to her after she tells him to leave, we have him. And if he doesn't approach directly, Shelby asked. If he just watches? Follows? That's still stalking, especially given your documented history. But we need it on record. We need witnesses. We need evidence that would hold up in court. Iris pulled out a folder thick with documents. I've already contacted a detective I trust, Trent Ashford. He's with the Reno PD, works special victims. He's willing to coordinate surveillance. But Shelby, you need to understand what you're agreeing to. You'll be bait. You'll have to act normal. Go about your routine, knowing Byron or his investigator might be watching. Can you do that? Shelby's hands were clenched on the table, knuckles white. Duncan reached over and covered them with his own. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. We can still run. We can disappear. And then what? Shelby's eyes met his, and he saw the exhaustion there. The years of fear finally reaching a breaking point. I run forever? I look over my shoulder for the rest of my life? What kind of existence is that? A safe one. It's not safe. It's just slow torture. She turned to Iris. What do you need me to do? Over the next 3 hours, they built a plan. Shelby would return to Reno, to the apartment, to her normal routine. Duncan would go to work. Piper would go to school. On the surface, everything would appear normal. But Detective Ashford's team would be watching. Unmarked cars, plainclothes officers, surveillance equipment. They'd document every movement Byron or his investigator made. We'll file an emergency protective order first thing Monday morning, Iris explained. That makes it illegal for Byron to contact you in any way. If he shows up after that, it's an automatic violation. Criminal charges. What if he doesn't show up? Duncan asked. Then we've lost nothing. You have the protective order. You have law enforcement aware of the situation, and Shelby has legal standing. But based on what I know about Byron's personality type, the obsession, the need for control, he'll show up. Men like him can't help themselves. They worked through the details until dawn broke over the fields outside. Iris had thought of everything: safe words, emergency protocols, backup plans. She gave Shelby a small recording device disguised as a pendant. Wear this at all time. It's voice-activated, encrypted, and will capture anything said within 20 feet. If Byron approaches you, if he says anything, threats, pleas, anything, we'll have it on record. As the sun rose, Duncan made coffee while Shelby documented her entire history with Byron. Every incident, every injury, every threat. Iris took notes, asked clarifying questions, built a timeline that painted a clear picture of escalating abuse and obsession. Piper woke around 8, confused and frightened. Duncan took her outside, explained as much as he could without terrifying her. Shelby's in trouble, he said, sitting with her on the porch steps. Someone from her past is trying to hurt her, and we're helping make sure she stays safe. The person she was running from? Piper's voice was small but not surprised. She'd figured out more than they'd given her credit for. Yes, are we in danger? Duncan wanted to lie, to protect her innocence, but he'd never been dishonest with his daughter. Possibly. That's why we're being careful. That's why we have people helping us. But Piper, I need you to trust me. Can you do that? She leaned against him, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders. I trust you, Dad, and I like Shelby. She's nice to me. She helps me with homework and doesn't treat me like a baby. She cares about you. A lot. Then we help her, Piper said with the simple moral clarity of childhood. That's what families do. Duncan's throat tightened. Yeah, kiddo. That's exactly what families do. They returned to Reno late Sunday afternoon. Detective Ashford met them at the apartment. A solid man in his 40s, with graying hair and kind eyes that had seen too much. I've got 2 teams ready to start surveillance tomorrow morning, he said, showing them photos of the officers who'd be watching. They'll maintain distance, but stay close enough to intervene if needed. We've also installed cameras at the building entrance and in the parking lot. He turned to Shelby. I need you to understand, this isn't without risk. If Byron is unstable, if he's armed, things could escalate quickly. We'll do everything we can to keep you safe, but I can't make guarantees. I understand, Shelby said. One more thing. Ashford pulled out a panic button small enough to fit on a keychain. This connects directly to dispatch. You press it, every officer in the area responds immediately. Keep it with you at all times. That night, after Piper had gone to bed, Duncan and Shelby sat in the living room, the weight of what was coming pressing down on them. I'm scared, Shelby admitted. I'm terrified. Me too. What if something goes wrong? What if he hurts you or Piper? He won't. We won't let him get that close. Shelby pulled the locket from her pocket. She'd never sold it, had kept it as a talisman. She opened it, looking at the young couple frozen in time. "Do you think they were scared?" she asked. "When he went off to war? When they didn't know if they'd see each other again? Probably. But they did it anyway. They had faith that love was stronger than fear. Is it?" Duncan thought about Piper sleeping safely in the next room. He thought about Shelby, who'd survived so much and was still finding the courage to stand and fight. He thought about the strange, unexpected family they'd become. "Yes," he said, "I think it is." Monday morning came too quickly. Duncan drove Piper to school, waited until she was safely inside, then headed to work. His phone stayed in his pocket, ringer on high, waiting for a call he desperately hoped wouldn't come. Shelby went to the clinic, wearing the recording pendant and carrying the panic button. She saw patients, smiled, acted normal, all while her heart raced with every footstep in the hallway, every car that passed outside. Detective Ashford's team was invisible but present. A woman reading a newspaper in a car across the street. A man jogging past the clinic entrance. Professionals doing their job, watching, waiting. The first day passed without incident. So did the second. By Wednesday, Shelby was beginning to wonder if Byron had moved on, if maybe she really had escaped this time. She allowed herself to hope just a little. Then Thursday afternoon, as she was leaving the clinic, she saw him. Not Byron, his investigator, the same man she'd glimpsed weeks ago, now standing across the street, phone to his ear, eyes locked directly on her. Shelby's hand went to the panic button, but she didn't press it. Not yet. She needed him to do something, say something, make a move that could be documented. The man crossed the street, approaching with confident strides. Shelby's pulse thundered in her ears, but she stood her ground. "Shelby," he said, stopping 5 feet away. "My name is Vance. I work for Byron. He just wants to talk to you." Shelby's hand tightened around the panic button. The recording pendant was capturing every word. She saw Detective Ashford's team moving into position at the periphery of her vision. "Tell Byron I have nothing to say to him," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "Tell him to stay away from me. He misses you. He loves you. He just wants you to come home. I'm never going back. If he comes near me, I'll press charges." Vance's expression hardened. "You're making this very difficult." Byron's been patient, but his patience is running out. He knows where you live. He knows about the man and his daughter. It would be a shame if something happened to them because you're being stubborn. The threat was clear, documented, undeniable. Shelby pressed the panic button. Within seconds, unmarked cars surrounded them. Detective Ashford appeared from nowhere, badge out, voice authoritative. "Vance Crawford, you're being detained for questioning regarding stalking and harassment. Put your hands where I can see them." Vance's face went from confident to shocked to resigned in the span of seconds. As officers moved in, he looked at Shelby with something like pity. "This won't stop him," he said. "Byron's coming. And when he does, no police presence will stop what happens next." Shelby stood frozen as they led Vance away. Detective Ashford approached, concern in his eyes. "You did good," he said. "We got everything on recording. Explicit threats, intimidation, stalking. This is exactly what we needed." "He said Byron's coming," Shelby whispered. "Then we'll be ready." The interrogation of Vance Crawford lasted 6 hours. Detective Ashford kept Duncan and Shelby updated throughout the evening, his voice carefully neutral over the phone. "He's talking," Ashford said. "Not cooperating exactly, but talking. We found extensive surveillance files in his car, photos of you, Shelby, going back weeks, photos of Duncan, of Piper, time-stamped locations, daily routines. It's obsessive and it's illegal." Duncan felt his blood run cold at the mention of his daughter. "Piper's in those files?" "Yes, which makes this even more serious. He's been watching your entire family. We've got enough to charge him with multiple counts of stalking, witness intimidation, and making terroristic threats." "But Duncan, there's something else." "What?" "Byron's already here. In Reno. Has been for 2 days. Vance gave up his location, a hotel downtown. We're getting a warrant now." Shelby had been listening on speaker and her face went pale. "He's here. He's been here this whole time. We're going to bring him in for questioning," Ashford assured them. With everything we have, Vance's testimony, the recorded threats, your documented history, we can make charges stick. But I need you both to stay somewhere safe tonight. Don't go home. Don't follow your normal patterns. They took Piper back to the safe house, the farmhouse where Iris was waiting, with updates on the legal proceedings. The emergency protective order had been filed and approved. Byron was legally prohibited from coming within 500 feet of Shelby. If he violates it, he goes to jail, Iris explained. No bail, no negotiation. The judge took your case seriously, Shelby. She saw the evidence, read your testimony. She's not going to let him walk away from this. But Shelby couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled over her like a shroud. Byron had been in Reno for 2 days, watching, planning, waiting for the right moment. What if he doesn't care about the protective order? She asked. What if he's past the point of caring about consequences? Then he'll face those consequences, Iris said firmly. The law is on your side now. You're not alone in this. That night Duncan sat with Shelby on the porch while Piper slept inside. The fields around them were dark and quiet, stars bright overhead in the absence of city lights. I keep thinking about what Vance said, Shelby murmured, that nothing will stop Byron. What if he's right? He's not right. We've got law enforcement involved now. We've got documentation. Byron's not invisible anymore. You don't know him like I do. When he decides something, when he sets his mind to it, he doesn't stop. He'll find a way. Duncan pulled the faded photograph of Piper from his wallet, the same one he'd carried through all the hard months, the reminder of why he kept fighting. He handed it to Shelby. You know what this represents? He said. It's not just my daughter. It's the promise I made to be the kind of man she can be proud of. The kind of man who doesn't walk away when things get hard. The kind who stands up for people who need help. He met Shelby's eyes. You gave me the chance to be that man. Whatever happens with Byron, whatever comes next, I'm not backing down. Shelby's eyes filled with tears. I don't want you to get hurt because of me. I won't, and neither will you. We're finishing this, Shelby, together. The call came at 2 a.m. Duncan's phone buzzing on the nightstand jerked him awake. Detective Ashford's voice was tight with controlled urgency. Byron's gone. He checked out of his hotel 3 hours ago. We have officers looking for him now. But Duncan, we have to assume he knows about the protective order. We have to assume he's escalating. Duncan was already pulling on his clothes. Where would he go? Your apartment is the most likely target. We've got units stationed there, but I need you to stay where you are. Don't leave the safe house. Don't engage if he shows up there. He doesn't know about this place. Does he? We don't think so. But we're not taking chances. I'm sending 2 patrol cars to your location now. They'll maintain a perimeter. Duncan woke Shelby and explained the situation. Her face was remarkably calm, as if she'd been expecting this moment all along. He's coming to finish it, she said simply. That's what he does. He doesn't let people leave him. If he can't have me, he'll make sure no one can. That's not going to happen. You can't promise that. Watch me. Within 20 minutes, 2 patrol cars had arrived, parking at strategic positions around the property. The officers checked the perimeter, confirmed all entry points were secure, then settled in to wait. Duncan, Shelby, and Iris stayed in the kitchen, lights low, watching the darkness outside. Piper remained asleep, and Duncan was grateful for that small mercy. I've handled 43 cases like this, Iris said quietly. 43 women running from abusive partners. You want to know how many times the abuser actually showed up for a direct confrontation? How many? Shelby asked. Twice. Most of them are cowards. They only feel powerful when they have total control. The moment law enforcement gets involved, the moment there are witnesses and consequences, they back down. Byron's not most men. Maybe not. But he's not invincible either. They waited in tense silence as the hours crawled past. 3 o'clock came and went, then 4. At 4:30, one of the officers radioed in. Vehicle approaching. Black sedan. Single occupant. Male driver. Duncan's entire body went rigid. Shelby stood, her hand instinctively going to the recording pendant around her neck. The car slowed as it reached the end of the driveway, headlights cutting through the darkness. Then it stopped, engine idling, as if the driver was considering his options. "Officers are moving to intercept." Ashford's voice crackled over the radio one of the officers had left on the kitchen counter. The sedan's door opened. A man stepped out. Through the window, in the faint glow of the porch light, Shelby saw him clearly for the first time in months. Byron, tall, well-dressed even at this hour, moving with the confidence of someone who believed he was in control. "That's him," Shelby whispered. And then everything happened at once. The officers moved with practiced precision, emerging from their vehicles with weapons drawn, but pointed down, voices firm and authoritative. "So stop where you are. Keep your hands visible." Byron froze, his face illuminated in the harsh glare of flashlights. For a moment, he looked genuinely surprised, as if he hadn't expected this level of response. Then his expression shifted, not to fear but to calculation. "I'm here to see my wife," he said, his voice carrying across the distance with eerie calm. "I just want to talk to her. Sir, you are in violation of a protective order. You need to leave this property immediately." Byron took another step forward. "You don't understand. Shelby is confused. She needs help. I'm the only one who can help her." Inside the house, Shelby's breathing had become rapid and shallow. Duncan moved to stand beside her, his hand on her shoulder, grounding her. "He's delusional," she whispered. "He actually believes what he's saying." Through the window, they watched as the officers moved closer to Byron, attempting to de-escalate while maintaining control of the situation. Detective Ashford's voice came over the radio again, now on scene. "Byron Gaines, I'm Detective Ashford with the Reno Police Department. You're currently in violation of an emergency protective order. You have two options: leave voluntarily or you'll be arrested." Byron's laugh was sharp, bitter. "Arrested for what? Trying to see my wife? Trying to bring her home where she belongs?" "She's not your wife anymore," Ashford said firmly. "And she doesn't want to see you. You need to leave now." "I'm not leaving without her." The tension ratcheted up immediately. The officers shifted their stances, hands moving to their weapons. Duncan saw it happening as if in slow motion, Byron's hand moving toward his jacket pocket. "Show me your hands!" one officer shouted. Byron pulled his hand out slowly, deliberately. He was holding a phone. "I'm calling my lawyer." "This is harassment. Police harassment. Put the phone down and step away from the vehicle." But Byron didn't comply. Instead, he turned toward the house, his eyes scanning the windows as if he could see through the darkness. When he spoke again, his voice was louder, directed at the building itself. "Shelby, I know you're in there. We need to talk about this. You can't just throw away 6 years of marriage." Inside, Shelby flinched as if struck. Duncan felt her trembling under his hand. 6 years of marriage, she repeated, her voice hollow. As if that's all it was. As if the violence didn't count. As if my fear didn't matter. Iris moved to the phone mounted on the kitchen wall, a landline the safe house maintained for emergencies. "I'm calling the DA. With Byron on scene, violating the protective order, making direct contact, this just became an open and shut case." Outside, Detective Ashford was approaching Byron with measured steps. "Mr. Gaines, I'm going to ask you one more time. Leave the property, or you will be arrested." Byron's facade of calm was cracking now. His voice rose, tinged with desperation and anger. "She's my wife. I have a right to see her. You can't keep us apart." Actually, the court can and did. "You were served with the protective order yesterday. You knew you couldn't be here. That order is garbage, based on lies," she told. "I never hurt her. I loved her." "Love doesn't leave bruises," Ashford said quietly. "Love doesn't send private investigators to stalk someone across state lines. Love doesn't threaten innocent people." Something in Byron snapped. He started moving toward the house again, his steps quick and purposeful. The officers moved to intercept, and Byron shoved one of them, not violently, but enough to make contact, enough to escalate the situation from verbal to physical. That was all the justification they needed. Within seconds, Byron was face down on the gravel driveway, hands being cuffed behind his back, officers reading him his rights. He was shouting now, all pretense of civility gone. "You're making a mistake." "Shelby, tell them!" Tell them this is a misunderstanding." Shelby didn't move, didn't speak. She stood frozen at the window, watching the man who'd terrorized her for years, finally being held accountable. "Tell them!" Byron screamed, his voice breaking. "Shelby, please. I love you. I just want you to come home." The words that had once had power over her, the pleas, the proclamations of love, the manipulation disguised as devotion, fell flat now. Shelby felt something inside her shift, like a door closing on a chapter of her life she'd never have to revisit. "He's never going to understand," she said softly. "In his mind, he's the victim. I'm the one who wronged him by leaving. That doesn't matter anymore," Duncan said. "What matters is he can't hurt you now." They watched as the officers loaded Byron into a patrol car. He was still shouting, still protesting, but the sound was muffled now, impotent. Just noise. Detective Ashford walked toward the house, and Iris let him in. His face was grim but satisfied. "We got him," he said simply. "Multiple violations of the protective order, assault on an officer, stalking, harassment. He's not getting out on bail. Not this time." Shelby's legs gave out and Duncan caught her, lowered her gently into a chair. She wasn't crying, she was beyond tears. She was simply empty, as if every ounce of fear and tension had drained out of her in an instant. "It's over," she whispered. "It's really over." "It's over," Ashford confirmed. "He'll go to trial, and with everything we have, the evidence, the recordings, the witnesses, he's looking at serious time. Years, Shelby. He won't be able to hurt you or anyone else." For the first time in 6 years, Shelby took a breath that didn't hurt. 3 months had passed since that night at the safe house. 3 months since Byron had been arrested, charged, and remanded to custody pending trial. 3 months since Shelby had finally allowed herself to believe that the nightmare was truly over. The apartment had become a real home in that time. Not just a place to sleep, but a space filled with the small rituals and rhythms that made a family. Piper's drawings covered the refrigerator. Shelby's nursing textbooks, she'd enrolled in a certification program to update her credentials, sat stacked on the coffee table. Duncan's work boots waited by the door, tired but honest reminders of steady employment and honest labor. It was a Saturday morning in early December, and the three of them sat around the kitchen table eating pancakes. Piper was chattering about a school project, something about the solar system, and whether Pluto should still be considered a planet. "I think Pluto got a raw deal," Duncan said, flipping another pancake onto her plate. "Just because something's small doesn't mean it doesn't matter." "Exactly," Piper agreed enthusiastically. "That's what I'm putting in my report." Shelby smiled, watching them with an expression of contentment that still felt new, still felt fragile, but was growing stronger every day. The trial was scheduled for January. Iris had prepared her thoroughly, walked her through what to expect, promised to be beside her every step of the way. Byron's lawyer had attempted to negotiate a plea deal, but the DA had refused. This case was going to trial, and Byron was going to face full consequences. "I have something for you," Shelby said to Piper once breakfast was finished. She retrieved a small wrapped box from her room and set it on the table. Piper's eyes lit up. "What is it?" "Open it and see." Piper tore through the wrapping paper with the enthusiasm of a 12-year-old, then gasped when she saw what was inside. The antique locket, polished and gleaming, rested on a bed of tissue paper. "Is this the one you and Dad found?" "The really old one?" "It is," Shelby said. "I've been holding on to it because I wanted to give it to someone special. Someone who reminded me that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about the people who choose to stand beside you." Piper looked up at her, understanding dawning in her young face. "You're giving this to me?" "If you want it. It belonged to people who loved each other, who stayed together through hard times. I think they'd be happy knowing it went to someone as brave and kind as you." Piper threw her arms around Shelby, nearly knocking her chair backward. "Thank you, I love it. I'll keep it forever." Duncan watched the embrace, his throat tight with emotion. His daughter had embraced Shelby completely, never questioning her presence in their lives, accepting her with the simple grace that children possessed when adults treated them with honesty and respect. Later that afternoon, while Piper was at a friend's house, Duncan and Shelby drove to the storage facility one last time. Unit 47's rent had finally expired, and they needed to clear out the last few items they'd left behind. The unit looked smaller now, emptier, stripped of the chaos and mystery that had defined it 3 months ago. Just a concrete box with fading paint and a door that squeaked when it rolled up. "Hard to believe this is where it all started," Duncan said, standing in the doorway. "I spent weeks hiding in here," Shelby said, her voice distant with memory. "Terrified, alone, convinced I'd die in this place. But you didn't. No, you opened that door and everything changed." They worked in comfortable silence, gathering the last cardboard boxes, a few old blankets, items they'd donate to the shelter where Karen had once helped Shelby. It felt right, completing the circle, passing on the kindness that had been shown to them. As they were finishing, Shelby found something tucked in the back corner, the rusty padlock Duncan had cut that first day. She picked it up, the metal heavy in her hand. "Can I keep this?" she asked. "The old lock, why?" "As a reminder that sometimes the scariest doors are the ones worth opening. That sometimes taking a risk when you have nothing left to lose is exactly the right choice." Duncan smiled. "Yeah, you can keep it." They loaded the last items into the truck and stood for a moment, looking at the empty unit. Then Duncan pulled the door down one final time, the metal clanging with a sound of finality. That evening, after Piper had gone to bed, Duncan and Shelby sat on their small balcony. The city stretched out before them, lights twinkling in the December darkness, but they were focused on each other and the quiet peace they'd built together. "I testified in a deposition yesterday," Shelby said, "for Byron's trial. Iris was there and it was hard, but I got through it. I told the truth about everything. How do you feel?" "Strong, scared, relieved, all of it at once," she paused. "For the first time in my life, I feel like I have agency. Like my voice matters. Like I'm not just surviving, I'm actually living. You are living. We both are." Shelby looked at the apartment behind them, warm light spilling from the windows. "I never thought I'd have this. A home, a family, people who cared whether I lived or died. Well, you do. And we're not going anywhere." Inside, on the mantel in the living room, 3 objects sat side by side. The faded photograph of Duncan and Piper, now joined by a newer photo of all 3 of them at a park, Piper in the middle, everyone smiling. Beside them sat Sergeant Harold Finch's dog tag, a reminder that courage was possible even in the darkest times. And finally, the rusty padlock from Unit 47, a symbol of barriers broken and new beginnings found. Sometimes the things we're searching for aren't what we expected to find. Duncan had gone looking for a way to survive, for something to sell that might buy him one more day, one more chance to bring his daughter home. Instead, he'd found something far more valuable, a reminder that even when you've lost everything, compassion and courage and a willingness to help someone in need could rebuild not just one life, but 2. And sometimes, Shelby had learned, the greatest treasures weren't made of gold or silver. They were made of trust and safety and belonging. They were made of a 12-year-old girl who accepted you without judgment, and a man who saw your worth when you'd forgotten you had any. They were made of family, not the one you were born into, but the one you chose, the one you built together from broken pieces and hope and $80 that bought far more than a storage unit full of junk. It bought a future, and that was priceless.